While we typically try to keep our episodes light, today we will be discussing sensitive topics. Please be mindful of your own personal limitations and use your best judgment. You are welcome to skip ahead or skip this episode entirely, but whatever you choose, please do what is best for you. Welcome to the Therapist Uncut podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young, Jolene Daly, and Alyssa Nahara.
Welcome back, Therapist Uncut listeners. If you tuned in last week, you got to listen to part one of our interview with Officer Michael Shaw on his experience of losing his dear friend to suicide. Today, we're going to be talking about the second part to his interview, which is how he coped with it and his experience with post-traumatic stress disorder.
So it seems like you've embarked on a new journey to share your story, which will continue to help you and hopefully help the community change some myths about law enforcement and mental health. What are your goals and dreams for sharing your story like this? And Matt's, I want to make sure that we honor the fact that this is Matt's story too.
Yes. I don't ever want to say that he died in vain. And going back to my faith, I really believe that things happen for a reason. It's all part of a higher plan. And so, for those who aren't, really faith-based or grounded, there's been a chain of events that have happened that have gotten me to where I am today. And it's on my heart, and it's, I feel the need that I've been given this gift. I call this, people say, why would you call this a gift? Well, I call it a gift because I now have the ability to go out and help others. I can tell the story and show them that there's life after PTSD, For whatever reason, you were chosen to go through this horrific event, but you survived it. I survived it. And there's someone else out there who is suffering literally right now from something, and they're afraid to ask for help because they're afraid they're going to be judged. They're afraid they're going to have stigma attached to them. Whether you're a police officer, you're a veteran, you're a firefighter, or any type of, you don't have to be a first responder. You could be anybody. All it takes is some type of traumatic event that it just overwhelms you to cause this to happen. It can be overcome. It's not life ending. Is it life altering? Absolutely. But it can be overcome. And that's what people need to realize is you can get through it, and ending your life is not the way to get away from this. And I say that on two sides, two folds. People don't realize, I loved Matt to death. But I think that I know that if he knew the ripple effect of his death, what it caused, the backlash, he never in a million years would want to hurt people. He would want people to suffer. So in a way, it's kind of a selfish act. It's a very selfish act because it's said, it's done, it's over with for them. But the aftermath it leaves behind is devastating. I recently had a call with a man, he's middle-aged, and he'd called and said he needed an officer to come out and talk to him, that he had tried to kill himself by hanging himself from a tree, but the rope broke and he wasn't able to accomplish it. And then he spent literally all day looking for another tree to do it from. And for one reason or another, couldn't find another tree, whether he'd find the right tree and then a farmer would come out in the field, or he'd find a right tree and a car would drive by, and he knew that he wouldn't be able to probably accomplish it without someone interrupting some way or some form. And that, his feet were tired. He couldn't hardly walk anymore. He'd been literally walking all day long. And I got that call. And so I get out and I talk to him. We have a conversation. And in the end, I tell him, your life has value. And there's a reason why you haven't been able to do what you wanted to accomplish today. And there's a reason why that rope broke last night. Is because, God's not done with you. There's a purpose for your life. And right now you may not see it, but somewhere down the road, you're going to tell this story to somebody and say that, he wasn't going to let me go that day. And that story for someone else who's thinking about hanging themselves or killing themselves is going to be impacted, and it may just change their decision. It may just save their life, kind of thing. And I, just like I told you guys, I told him, I said, there's a reason why we go through things. We hit that rock bottom, but yet we survive it. We're being given a gift to talk about later and help others. So, and I'm sure everybody's kind of wondering this question because we haven't talked about it yet. Never was I suicidal. Never. I never, ever thought to myself that I wanted to end my own life. What I can tell you is I was constantly looking for a way to deal with what I thought was going to be my new normal. These were going to be my new symptoms, and I needed to figure out a way that this was going to how I was going to get through life, with feeling these things. At the rate I was going without the help I received, I can't tell you that somewhere down the line I would not have been suicidal myself. I don't know that I may have gotten to the point where I was just like, I can't take this no more kind of thing. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that probably go along that same path and get to that end result. For me, luckily it was, knowing my family history and passing the blood, which caused me to go to the doctor. But had that not happened, I don't know that I would have gone to the doctor. And I don't know that, again, I'd be here talking to you about this today. Just because I may have gotten to a point where I went down that path. Thank God I didn't. But, it's a long, dark tunnel that feels like there's no end in sight. And, I truly believe people try to accept that as that's what their new normal is going to be.
And I want to draw a few connections between some things that you said in the last few minutes, and I think they all interconnect. You mentioned that your friend would never have wanted to leave behind the pain and suffering that he did to his friends and family and his community and his fellow officers. You said, him. He would never, that never would have been his goal, nor would it ever have been something that he would have wanted to do. You've also mentioned how members of the law enforcement community are expected to be these impervious shields, right? They're supposed to be robotic. They're not supposed to have emotional reactions to things. They're supposed to be the tough guy that's out there to handle business. So if we connect those two, obviously he was going through something, wasn't able to acknowledge it, and that led down that path that you're talking about, the dark tunnel, and ultimately led to a point where he did commit suicide and take his life. And like you said, he never would have intended to hurt somebody. So we can only begin to imagine how deep that pain was to get to that point. Do you have, I don't know if suggestions is the right word, but what is something that you would like to share with, and again, obviously suicide and PTSD affect countless members of the population, but specifically to law enforcement, first responders, individuals who deal with the dangerous, the ugly, the bad of society on a daily basis. What advice or knowledge have you gained that you would like to put out there into the world and share with somebody who might be experiencing what you've experienced, who might be experiencing what Matt has? What do you want to tell them?
Don't let it fester. The signs of you being bothered by something may be very subtle in the beginning, not being able to sleep. I think that's probably one of the first things that you just have this, I can't settle down at night. For me, I know, like I said, here we are 14 years later. Do I still have some residual from it? Sure. And it always happens at night when I'm going to lay down in bed, if it's going to happen. And I could be thinking about nothing. I'll just have a little bit of a, rapid heart rate or whatever. Or an uneasiness where I struggle to relax sometimes. But that could be one of the first things that someone experiences, just anxiety when they're trying to lay down and go to sleep, or struggle sleeping, struggle staying asleep. Sleep is so important to people. As human beings, we need sleep to function. And when you cannot do that, you're going to have some serious issues from it. If one starts to realize that maybe their consumption of alcohol is increasing, they need to kind of look at why. If they're starting to live a more riskier type of lifestyle and are looking for something that poses a little more risk than they normally would take, they may need to look at why. As people, we all have different triggers. In my job, the things that get to me the most involve children. Those are, for whatever reason, If it's a situation where a child has been victimized in one way or form or the other, those are what impact me the most. Many times if I walked in the door after a shift and when I've laid eyes on my wife, I've been able to, just say X, Y, and Z happened, and let my emotion out kind of thing. It doesn't happen at work just because my training kicks in. But when I come home, that's when I'm able to kind of let my guard down. And with her, I've always been able to let my guard down. She's like my safe haven. I can confide in her about anything and everything. That she's my person. That's just, well, obviously she's my wife, so she better be my person. But I have that support system at home, and I have that through the chaplain Dave. I can go to him about anything. He's from that day has always been there. We have that bond. It is my hope that everybody has a best friend or whatever they can go talk to somebody about. But sometimes that's not going to do the trick. Sometimes you need the help. Law enforcement has many services available to them. We have an EAP pamphlet service that it can be utilized. Every law enforcement agency out there has it, and it's free to them. They can utilize. Most agencies have chaplains. If they don't, I promise you, there's another agency out there that has a chaplain that is willing to fill that void and help you. Most agencies, and I'm not talking about just law enforcement, fire, ambulance, a lot of times they have contracts with a psychologist somewhere. That's services that are offered to us. Because obviously, if you're having a problem even away from work, it can trickle into work, which can cause problems. There are services out there available to people, and they're confidential. No one's asking you to stand up in the middle of your briefing and say, I'm having a problem, kind of thing. You don't have to do that. You have your person, or you have these services you can go to. But if you don't do it through, after a matter of time, it is going to come to a bad result if you don't take care of the problem. Like I said, thank God for me, everything worked out the way it did. But I recognize the mentality that I had, and I wasn't even a police officer yet. And so do I want to be perceived as weak by the public, or do I want my coworkers or my administration to perceive me as weak or damaged goods, if you will? I don't want to be perceived that way, and neither does any. I mean, let's take the profession out of the equation. Nobody just walking down the street ever wants to be perceived that way, but there are services out there that people can use to overcome these issues.
Michael, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Earlier you mentioned, and just throughout, you mentioned a lot of the myths that kind of come with seeking this help and seeking these services, and the fear that somebody might have to access these services. What was your experience, and how you, in sharing this story and sharing this message, how do you feel like that was received by your profession, despite the initial fears you may have had?
At the time, like I said, I was an animal control officer. I never really sat down in front of my administration and said that I'm having this problem. Never. I went to Dave, and of course he took me in with open arms, and he got me through it, kind of thing. I don't know that a person has to necessarily go to their bosses and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. It can be kept confidential. Now, if they reach a point where they are a safety issue, obviously they could go up what's called a fit for duty kind of thing, but we're talking about very severe, very almost suicidal, themselves, where that could pose a problem. But someone who's standing up and saying, I'm having a problem, and is acknowledging that and is seeking the help, they're probably fine to conduct business and do their job, and they're just getting help on the side kind of thing. I think rarely it would come to a point where we call it pulling yourself offline because of the problems you're having. Now, it does happen, and it don't have to be suicidal, but you could be struggling so bad that you can't function. That is a possibility as well. And so, again, there have been officers who, have had these issues and gotten to the point where they couldn't physically work because they had, deal with what they were dealing, overcome whatever symptoms they're having. But those officers are back to work now, kind of thing. So I have seen both sides of it, but generally you don't have to get your administration involved. You can just go seek the help, the services that you're entitled to as a first responder.
Thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciate it, because I think a lot of our listeners do have that fear that you had shared about being perceived as being weak or not being able to handle it. And this has been a fairly long journey for you and experiencing it. And now you said something earlier that was spot on. It's not life altering, not life.
Not, I said it's not life ending, it's life altering.
Perfect. So well said, because it does change kind of, and it does impact your life. So my question for you is, now that you have come this far in your journey, how are you continuously making sure that you keep your mental health a priority and you are coping with this on an ongoing basis or as it comes up?
I recognize it, first of all. I recently went to a class I took on my own. It was trauma and law enforcement. And it was, taught by a psychologist, and, a lot of people are intrigued in the class, and they're going around telling their story. I'm curious how trauma can affect me as a police officer. And so when it came to my turn to talk, I got up and actually told my story as to what I've been through and whatnot. And one thing she had said prior to us doing our introductions was, she goes, one of the key things you'll hear, especially first responders, say is, "I'm fine." Just that phrase, "I'm fine." So that didn't cue in on me. And so when it came time for me to kind of tell my story a little bit and introduce myself, I ended it with, "But I'm fine now." And she goes, "Well, there it is. See the words, I'm fine." And so one thing she said to me in that class was, you never fully get over the symptoms of it. You learn to deal with them, kind of thing. And again, my symptoms have come, not completely, but have mostly gone away. And I don't have the struggles I have. I live a normal life. I work graveyards. I sleep during the day. I'm not afraid of nothing. I don't worry about the house catching on fire or those things anymore because I got the help I did. We're not fine. However, we learn to deal and cope with the symptoms of it, residual wise. We'll just talk about that real quick. What do I have residual from my incident 14 years ago? Balloons. I don't like balloons. They have a tendency of spontaneously popping. People ask, well, how do you carry a gun on your side? Because if it goes off, obviously it's going to create an even louder boom. You're right. But my training tells me that if I go to a call, or just the fact that I'm carrying it and I know what I do for a living, I have an expectation of that going off. I don't think about it, but it's almost like it's ingrained in me that to know that there's a chance that thing could go off. Or I'm on duty, I'm at work, or even if I decide to carry off duty, you add a layer of expectation of, because I have this, something could happen that could cause this to happen. It's, I guess it's psychological, if you will. But a balloon, something as easy as a balloon, you're with your family and so you're not carrying off duty. And, like my family and I, we'd love to go to like street fair type things. And I swear every time the kids get in the car and they got balloons, and it just the sight of them gives me anxiety because I'm afraid they're going to pop, kind of thing. And I tell my wife, like, just put them up front with you, get them away from the kids until we get home, kind of thing. Because I don't want them driving down the road and pop go off, kind of thing, because it's just going to send me for a loop, whatever. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's true. Something as simple as a balloon. So I just don't like them. Another thing is it's kind of become a game almost at work. My guys, they kind of play along. Maybe you guys can shed some light on how or why this happens. I don't know. But so, I work 11-hour shifts. And at the end of our shift, we unload our cars and stuff. I have to physically open the back door of my police car and visually look inside to see that there's nobody back there. Like I'm going to leave somebody back there and punish them, make them sit there all night, kind of thing while I'm gone. So at the end of a shift, me and my teammates will look at each other and say, "Oh, did you check the back seat of your car?" Like someone's going to be there. And, like I'm going to come to work the next day and the guy's going to be like in handcuffs in the back seat of my car going, "Okay, I've learned my lesson, let me out," kind of thing. It's kind of comical, but for whatever reason, if I don't do that and I go home, I will have anxiety to the point I've driven back to go look in my back seat to make sure no one's there. Even though I know it, if I didn't arrest anybody during my shift, I still have to do that. And lastly, right after this happened and when we were still trying to figure out what was going on with me, I used to be a great flyer. I've flown overseas to Germany 3 times in my life prior to this happening. We're talking 11-hour flights, no big deal. Well, then after this happened, my wife and I flew, I think to Texas, and hour-and-a-half flight, the first flight, second flight, 2 hours. And I was, I use the word crazy. I probably shouldn't use the word crazy, but so full of anxiety that every time a little bit of turbulence and I'm grabbing stuff and, oh my God, we're going down, we're going to die kind of thing. to the point like she probably needed meds just to be on the plane with me because how I was acting. That has subsided, whatnot. But those were some of the to this day. If we go somewhere we fly, I like to go on red-eye flights because I can take a sleeping aid and I can get on the plane and hopefully go to sleep. She can't. She just can't sleep on a plane. But for me, it's the best time to travel because my body's kind of tired already. And with the sleep aid, I'm able to kind of go to sleep and get my mind off of the fact that we're on an airplane. But before this incident, that never would have been an issue. Going back to, am I fine? No, I still have some residual. I still have a few issues, from it. But they're issues that I'm able to live with no problem. My quality of life is great. I live a fulfilling life. I have a fulfilling career. I have a wonderful family, a great wife, and I have my faith. People ask me all the time, how do you do the job you do? Because, let's face it, times in law enforcement are not getting better. They're getting worse. And the media does a fantastic job at spinning it towards making us out to be basically a criminal street gang. And it's getting to the point where it's, you're almost in a way playing Russian roulette with your life because you never know when it is that it could be a day where you could lose your life because someone just, for whatever reason, out of hate, decides to shoot you as you're parked on the side of the road kind of thing. It happens. It happens all over this country. And so for me, what keeps me grounded is my faith. I make sure every day on the way to work that I'm right with God. And it not only gives me peace, but it gives my family peace of knowing that if that was the day that it was pre-planned and by God for me to go, that they're going to see me again someday. They're going to know where I'm at. If it wasn't for my faith, I wouldn't do this job, to be honest with you. And maybe this is some more of the residual from my PTSD, but I literally would lock myself in a padded room with filtered air and never eat anything processed because I'd want to live forever. I'd be afraid of dying. I don't have a fear of dying because my faith gives me a promise that there's better waiting for me on the other side. And that gives me peace. We all have different levels of our faith and what we believe and what we practice. But going back to the suicide portion of it, we are literally, suffering from a pandemic of first responder suicide. People need to acknowledge, basically my message is, no matter what your faith is, you need to look inside and you need to practice and not practice, but you need to, realize what your triggers are, realize that things are bothering you, acknowledge those things and get away from feeling afraid that you're going to be judged. Don't be afraid of the stigma because at the end of the day, we're talking about you and your life and those who love you who are going to be impacted if, God forbid, you choose to take your own life because of what you're suffering from. This life is worth living. This life is fulfilling. And each and every one of us has somebody who needs us to be here for them. And if you take your own life because of something you're experiencing, are you going to solve your own issue? Maybe, maybe not, depending on what you believe. But what you are going to do is you're going to leave a huge hole behind that is going to impact several, and you're going to give them it's going to be a tough road for them to hoe if you make this decision.
Michael, I think we've got just one final question, and I am going to, I'm going to hand it off to Nikki or Jolene to ask.
So first of all, Michael, we want to appreciate you for having the strength the voice and the strength that you have to share your story and Matthew's story, that it is okay to seek help, because I think that, from an outside perspective, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I think I can see it from the outside that it has historically not been okay for someone in your position to seek help. So appreciative of your strength and courage and ability to use your voice in this way. We want to know where your goals and dreams are taking you. Where is this journey going for you? How do you want to continue to share the story?
My goals. So, I've pursued higher education. I waited until I was 36 years old to finish my BA. Kids don't do that. Go to school after you get out of high school and get it done. And now I'm in the master's program where I will graduate this year. So I've pursued higher education. It is my ultimate goal to find my way in a teaching capacity about probably more adjunct, but I guess I'm hoping someday that there's going to be some type of law enforcement mental health class where I can teach. I also, it is a desire of mine to travel and go to briefings and find my way into police departments where I can tell this story. Also into police academies. People aspiring to be police officers need to hear this story. They need to realize what it is they're going into. I say all the time that as law enforcement officers, our human eyes see things that is not designed to be seen. Things that the average person who isn't in a first responder role would never, ever be exposed to. So your average Joe, if you will, out there, other than what they see on TV, and what's on TV is not exactly accurate, is they don't realize what it is that they would see in this field. I can remember being the academy recruit, sitting there in my little 4-hour mental health block, being told by some instructor that, oh, you're going to see things in this job that's going to bother you. I didn't believe him. I was right there with them, laughed. There's nothing. This job's ever going to bother me. I'm bulletproof, right? I'm going to be a police officer. I'm going to be that robot that nothing's going to bother me because it's just so cool to be Mr. Macho. I now know that that's exactly the opposite. It's wrong. And I think that, I question my faith and why I would go through this, but that gift I talked about, this is where it applies. This is where it kicks in, because it's easy for someone to read text out of a book and say, so this is statistics and you're going to experience X, Y, and Z, blah, blah. But to have someone up there who has been through it, who can put a picture of Matt up on the projector and say, this man lost his life because of something that he, probably because of this job and because of the things or something traumatic. And then this is what I went through, but because of it, I can tell you that PTSD is real. And if you don't seek the help, this is the road you're going to go down. And, then you start from that, you take the statistics. We have law enforcement officers taking their own lives all over the place. What more proof and what more would you want in terms of having someone relatable? I think that because of what I've been through, I would like to think that I'm going to be more impactful than just someone reading out of a book and talking about it, kind of thing. I get to use my gift, if you will. I'll also, outside of that, it is a dream of mine, which is kind of funny. The idea of public speaking scares me, but at the same token is for whatever reason, it's just a burning desire of mine to motivationally speak on it. I got to see, it was in January of 2019, right after a good friend of mine, Corporal Ronell Singh from the Newman Police Department, got killed. And I got to go to, it's called a Cops Dinner. It's Concerns of Police Survivors. There was a dinner in Sacramento, and it was, their keynote speaker was a man named Paul Butler, whom I've become very close to and even consider my mentor. He's out of South Carolina. But he got up there and he spoke. He was a keynote speaker, and he was able to talk about his law enforcement experience as a motivational speaker, and also was able to apply his faith. And I remember looking at my wife and going, that's exactly what I want to do. And since then, I've reached out to this man. I'm very close to him, and I think someday I'm going to get to stand beside him on a stage and do the same thing. So those are the things that what has come from this. But ultimately, if I'm able to save one life by telling this story, or them sitting here listening to me be very real and raw, and to know that it's okay to let the guard down, one life, it was worth it. And that's all I want to do. I want people to know that, like I said, this is not life ending. This is just life altering.
Thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate you just sharing your time with us today and sharing Matt's story and your story. And you've not only been through this decade plus journey of going through this, but we look forward to the incredible journey that's ahead of you. And you just being able to say, I am not excited about public speaking, but I am so willing to do it, to be able to share this message. So I really just want to thank you for joining us today. And if there are any final thoughts that you want to leave with our listeners, now's the time to do it.
Share now, Michael, because we want to see you be able to do this, to be this public speaker, to be able to go out and do large talks, small talks, whatever. How could somebody reach you if they want to get you to come speak with their classroom or their school program, whatever the case may be? How can they reach you?
So I am not computer savvy, techie at all. I'm working on creating a website. The name I guess my organization is intended or is going to be called is Vested Purpose Presentations. So vested like the police vest we wear, and then purpose, obviously, and then presentations. So I do have an email set up. It's vestedpurposepresentations@gmail.com. You can get a hold of me. Look forward in the future to a website. There is a website if it's vestedpurposepresentations.com, but there is literally nothing there. It's just a kind of a black screen. So I am working on that, and that will come in the near future. But again, this is very early. I have 12 years, give or take, of my career still left, but on my schedule that would allow me to schedule events and whatnot. So it's my passion, it's my purpose, it's what I want to do, and I am here. Even if someone just needs to talk, send me an email. I will reach out to you, and we can talk through things. I've been utilized a couple times already. I've had the opportunity to go and have one-on-ones with a few, but haven't quite made it to in front of a crowd yet. I hope someday that comes, but even if just someone, one-on-one needs to talk, reach out to me and I'll reach right back out and we can chat.
That's awesome. So if you're listening and you're interested in Michael speaking, we'll go ahead and have his email address below. We won't do the website just because he says it's a black screen, but we'll definitely do that. You can also contact us, Therapist Uncut, in order to be able to get connected with him. We'll get him that information and things along that lines. We thank you so much for joining us today, joining Michael and Matthew with his story. Thank you so much. We'd love, Michael, to have you back at some point if you're willing, maybe in person. That would be really exciting.
I think technology has actually worked today, but a lot of times, with whatever, sometimes it's all glitchy. I think today we've been very, very blessed with the service. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And again, we want to see you continue on this journey because I believe your message is so important. And as somebody where, mental health and law enforcement are both passions of mine as well, I'm so excited to see you embark on this journey, and we're here to support you.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.